The views and opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of Time Warner Cable.
Hello and welcome. Welcome to The Bottom Line. My name is Dana Connors and I'm pleased to be your host for this monthly program brought to you by the Maine State Chamber of Commerce. And yes, if you have noticed that our set's a little different, that's because this month we are hosting this show out of the Portland studios. Next month we'll be right back at Augusta. So what you're seeing is a different set, but essentially the same program. So welcome. Each month we take a look at those policies, those programs, and those people at work making a difference in our lives as well as our livelihood, thus the bottom line. This month we're going to take a look at a challenge. It's the workforce challenge. But we're going to explore how to turn that challenge into a wonderful opportunity for our state and our people. I have two very special guests that are going to help me do that. But first let me put the issue in context. 5 years ago, the Make Maine Work initiative was created by the Maine State Chamber of Commerce in collaboration with the Maine Development Foundation. We took a look at those investment imperatives that would help our people as well as grow the economy. We started off as a new governor was to take office with what are the barriers facing our economy. We next moved the University of Maine system, how we could work together to help the educational pursuit there. We also looked at early childhood development. And the last two reports have focused on the challenge, the part of which we're going to look at today. The first part looked at how we're going to grow our workforce. How are we going to deal with the fact that we're an aging population and a declining population? We talked about that. We set up metrics. We're at work trying to help in that regard. But today, we're going to look at how do we go about preparing our workforce. There are two sides of the same coin. We need to grow our economy, our workforce. We need to prepare our workforce to help our economy. Our economists tell us that our success in the next 20 years depends upon our ability to grow our workforce as well as prepare our workforce. This report, most recent report, does just that. Let me introduce our guest and let them tell you how we're going to go about doing that and being successful at it. First of all, it's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Chris Quinn, president of Kaplan University campuses here in Maine. Also was the chair of our efforts behind working with both of our organizations, putting this report together. At his left is Ryan Neal, who's a program director at the Maine Development Foundation, was a principal researcher and architect, not only this report, but the previous reports as well. Thanks to both of you for being here. Chris, let me start with you. I was witness and participated in a very successful committee effort. Can you tell us a bit about who was involved and how you went about the process?
Sure, Dana. Thanks for having me here today. And I want to say it's a pleasure to be part of this second report on Maine's workforce, because the quality of Maine's workforce is really the core issue that we're dealing with here. And to start out, I want to talk about a statistic from Ryan's research, and that comes from the McKinsey Center of Government, talking about whether or not college graduates are prepared for the workforce. And when polled, if you ask industry executives, employers, are college graduates prepared for the workforce, 42% will say that they are prepared. When you ask the same question of higher ed administrators like myself, are college graduates prepared for the workforce? In that case, 72% say that they are ready. So 72% by college administrators, 42% by employers, and that gap, that 30-point gap, I really think speaks to the need for bridging these two worlds. And when you ask about the committee, this was our goal behind the committee, to have members from industry, employers, higher education come together to talk about these issues in a very productive manner. And those sorts of meetings are something that you would think happen every day. I'll tell you they don't.
Oh.
So thank you for making that effort happen.
Let's turn to you, Ryan. We've heard the gap. We realize that it was brought forth in this report. What are we going to do about it? How can we help correct that, turn that around?
Well, again, thanks for the opportunity to be here, Dana. From the Maine Development Foundation perspective, we're essentially banking on Maine's people to be the drivers of our future economy. So it's been a real pleasure and an honor to work with the Chamber and our other partners on these last two reports. Essentially, what we know today is there are a lot of great efforts going on. There's no shortage of organizations doing great work in and around this area. What we are lacking as a state is cohesion behind those efforts. We have not yet taken our best practices to scale. So these are essentially kind of one-off efforts that may be happening by happenstance. And while they're great, they're doing some great work, we really need to institutionalize those efforts. So the examples that are out there are not the exception, they're in fact the norm. And again, I think we've made some great strides in that area. The Workforce Committee that Dr. Quinn chaired certainly helped to bring this to more of a solution-oriented report, much less of an academic report. And we know it's a problem, but we really hope that we've got some of the right folks at the table and think we do.
We'll let both of you take a stab at this one, but what struck me as this report came together, that we're not asking for a new infrastructure, new organization. We're recognizing the good work, as you said, that's in place and trying to coalesce around that to get better results and a more successful story out of it. It seems to me also what was brought to bear in this is something that we've always realized but not been face to face with what it means, and that is to satisfy that gap. It doesn't mean that we're all going to get a PhD in some degree, that there's a multiple pathway. Do you want to talk about that? Because I think that's fundamental to what we see in this report and what we need to address.
Sure, Dana. I think that you hit the nail on the head. The employers understand the concept of competency. Degrees, valuable. Competencies in an area are even more valued by the industry employers. Bridging those two worlds again, how do you turn in alternate pathways of learning into college credit and make people ready for the workplace? We talk about hard skills, and we talk about the so-called professional competencies or soft skills. What we hear from employers a lot now is that those soft skills are becoming harder and harder to find. And how do we find the way to meet the needs of employers in getting to that goal of competency and training? I'll give you a great example. People come back to Maine. In the first report, we know that in Maine, members of the military, veterans, are employed at a lower rate in Maine than they are in, say, New Hampshire. So where does training come in? I'll tell you one big piece is to recognize some of the training that they've had in their military careers and find a way to get that to be college credit. So not only are people not spending more money on tuition for information they've already mastered, it'll speed them to a point of holding a degree. And I think that's a key example. And in this report, there's something for everyone. I think this is an important part to highlight, Dana, that the Chamber, MDF will not solve this alone. It's each of us, every employer, every government agency, taking on one new piece for the new year and saying, I'm going to scale some of the things that I learned about in this report. There are 5 pages of material in here are examples of best practice that can be scaled. We don't need to reinvent the wheel.
Let me follow up on that. One of the things that the report subtly referred to, but yet it needs to be brought out, is to pick up on what Chris just said. And that is, how do we get everybody together so that, and I'm leading you to the answer, how do we get everybody together so that we actually have an annual summit where the focus is on workforce preparation? Expand upon that before I answer it myself.
Sure. I think it's all about integration and collaboration. And the report intentionally stops short of assigning tasks to our recommendations, assigning an entity, a particular entity to work on these recommendations. We know that it will come from all angles, from all parties, from all stakeholders. So if we can get together annually to compare notes, to see what is going on in these different worlds, and I hesitate to say different worlds because they really shouldn't be different worlds. We've operated as separate systems, as separate worlds for too long now, and we really do need to bring that all under one umbrella.
And that, wouldn't it be nice if once a year we had a workforce preparation preparedness summit.
Certainly.
When all the parties got together, took stock of where we are, what we've accomplished, and what we need to do next. We're used to in this state having an economic summit. We're used to having other types of summits. But I think here's one that, in order to fulfill what you're saying, it would seem to me this would make sense. Do you agree with that? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, and again, these are stakeholders that should be talking more frequently, and we
Yeah.
don't see that happening. So bringing together people who are absolutely aligned in the goals. We have a lot of institutions, agencies, and groups that have been assembled to tackle problems of workforce development. The Workforce Investment Board, for example, Jobs for Maine grads is another example that we'll hear from today. The universities, industry, manufacturing. Get those people together once you're in a room and fantastic things will happen.
Yeah, I think we all agree with that. In fact, it's probably necessary if we are to achieve the level of success that we want to enjoy. Anything else, Ryan, that you want to add? We've got about 2 minutes left. I want to be sure that I don't miss out on
Sure,
something.
I would just add quickly that it's about preparing workers for the jobs that are available today, but we know that workers will need higher skills, higher education levels to be able to adapt to the jobs that are emerging tomorrow. The economy is always changing. It's always demanding more of workers. So it really is short-term and long-term, and we need to wrap our arms around both.
Yeah, and I think Chris spoke to this a moment ago, but I want to circle back for just a moment, and that is to say, in our first report, we had metrics because people weren't really getting into growing the workforce. Here, we found that there are some outstanding examples, and we didn't want to be presumptuous, so we need to get together to create those metrics to know that we are progressing or that we're not progressing to the extent that we want. In the minute left, Chris, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I think purposeful intervention only works if you have a metric that you're moving, or not, because then you can abandon those efforts and do something that will move us in the right direction. I also want to say in closing that Maine is a fantastic place. It's a unique place in the country, on the globe, and we have all the fundamental pieces in place. It's getting everybody together to execute on that plan.
On that point, it could not be said better. We'll be right back to continue this discussion with some people that have been involved that we are going to depend on to achieve the success that we know we want. Thank you very much. Be right back.
Are you sick of being kicked out of your bedroom because you snore? Fed up with having to sleep on the couch every night? Then you need Pure Sleep, the #1 selling snoring solution in the world.
The first night he stopped snoring.
The second night it worked, and the third night, and the fourth night, and I was about in tears because it worked.
Invented by a dentist who snored, Pure Sleep is FDA cleared and proven safe and effective.
Pure Sleep started working the very first night.
It's small, it's comfortable.
You don't even know you have it in.
Pure Sleep is guaranteed to stop your snoring right away. To prove it, we'll let you try it for 30 days before you buy it. All you do is cover the shipping and handling. Plus, for a limited time, we'll give you a second Pure Sleep with travel case at no additional cost.
If we don't have the Pure Sleep, he's on the couch.
To try Pure Sleep and get a second Pure Sleep free, visit 3puresleep.com. That's 3puresleep.com or call 1-800-440-5161 right now.
They said I couldn't dream. Called me a piece of trash and swore that's all I'd ever be. Said a bottle couldn't see the ocean. Give up. Go back to the dumpster. But I didn't listen. I made my way. And now, I am what I've always wanted to be.
If I got to go to college, oh my goodness. I just feel like that's my destiny. You get to make like a supernova of skill or talent or whatever it is. My name is Queen, and I am your dividend.
You're watching Time Warner Cable Community.
welcome back as we continue to take a look at the workforce challenge to our state with an eye particularly on how do we prepare our people for today's economy and tomorrow's possibilities. We're going to look at the quality question, and we're going to explore this time with two people that have been involved with the report in terms of reviewing it and so forth, but in my mind are very critical, if this program is to be successful, that you have an active role in its outcome, in its implementation. My two guests are Craig Larrabee from the Jobs for Maine's Graduate, president of that very successful organization. Craig, thank you for being here. And Garrett Oswald, who's program director, and for those who may not know, is the director of the State Workforce Investment Board. And for our audience, that is the board that, from a state's perspective, works to put a plan together to try to do the same things, if possible, that this report suggests that we should be doing. Garrett, I'm going to start with you. Did we do it? How does your plan, looking to the future, is it compatible with, does it conflict with, how does it stand in comparison to what we put forward?
Thank you for the opportunity, Dana. Yes, I think the plan does, in fact, align very nicely with the plan that the State of Maine and the Workforce Investment Board and the local boards are going to try and accomplish in the next couple of years. The key, I think, is a unified plan and the alignment and the partnerships that are embedded in this report. It speaks to using what we have and making sure that we capitalize on the good things that are already happening around the state of Maine, and making sure that it's not just happening in one corner of the state, but that we learn from it and we're able to capture that learning and spread it out across the state. So I think the report is exactly on target with where federal workforce legislation is going, what we see in other states that are being successful in terms of closing the so-called skills gap between the skills that their citizenry has and the kinds of skills that the businesses are requiring in terms of them coming to work. I think the report does exactly what we needed to do in terms of partnerships, alignment, and measuring the things that we want to see more of and incenting that.
Couldn't have asked for a better answer. I was worried that we might be off on the wrong track and we have to stop the program. Craig, same for you. I mean, you have a very successful program. It's a favorite in my eyes in terms of Jobs for Maine's graduates. You take those disenfranchised youth and you give them hope and promise. This report really speaks to making sure that business community is aware and makes a connection with what you represent. Is that important to you, and how does that work in terms of where you're headed going into the future?
Sure. Well, I think, first of all, the Maine State Chamber and the work you're doing with Maine Development Foundation, these reports, to me, are more than just a report. It's a campaign. It's a call to action. And it helps when you're on the front lines in trying to create collaboration, to have a report like this that talks about a strategy of where we go. It allows us to coalesce around a common vision, if you will, and a common strategy. So in my work, JMG is set up as a public-private partnership. And when we're trying to get the public sector and the private sector to work together, and JMG is that vehicle of bringing those financial resources and human resources together to support these young people are so important to the workforce in the state of Maine. It is just, it really positions us very well to have this sort of report and having the backing of the people that have done the report.
Yeah, it shouldn't surprise me, but you guys are good. You had all the right answers, well said. Actually, this is an editorial comment that may come back to haunt me, but needless to say, I'm older than you, and I only say that because with that age, I have seen an experience. I've seen a number of initiatives that have not reached their pinnacle of possibilities, if you will, or promise, because to no one's design, they end up going in separate directions. There is not that collaborative effort that brings forth the best possible results. Again, nobody is ill-intended or doing that by design, but we operate in silos instead of coming together. If this report, if this effort is to be successful, that can't be the case. We've got to come together and work. So this report was built on collaboration. Its success will depend on collaboration. Is there anything in here that you saw that you would say may need expansion on, or things that you would like to add that you would like to see us accomplish, or ways or you'd like to have us go about reaching some of this? Anything come to mind?
For me, Dana, it's the emphasis on the partnership of business with education. And what I mean by that, we're in a world today where it can't just be the school's responsibility to educate our children. It's got to be the entire community's responsibility. And the importance of the business community providing these non-traditional learning opportunities, whether there's internships or job shadows or exposure of what the careers are. What we're finding in our research and our conversation with our students that are in high school in Maine, they just don't know what those opportunities are. And we really need to emphasize the importance of getting the business community into the classroom and getting our kids outside of the classroom to find out what those opportunities are, where the jobs of the future are, so that kids can make more educated decision on what post-secondary educational opportunity they need to explore to reach that educational goal or economic goal.
Yeah, and we're finding that education begins almost at birth and follows us throughout the rest of our life. We know the value of on-the-job training, apprenticeships, internships, and I have come to realize how important internships are. About 70% of kids, people, not just kids, people who intern end up working for that company. How about apprenticeships? I see a new awakening, if you will, or a reawakening on the value of apprenticeships.
Apprenticeships actually will receive much more emphasis in the current plan that we have for the state of Maine and its workforce development system. Apprenticeship is often referred to as the other four-year degree. It's a great way for folks to learn skills at the same time as pursuing an academic degree. And we see that other countries that have utilized the apprenticeship model have done so very effectively in terms of a workforce preparation tool. We would like to see more of it. The federal act that was just passed will emphasize apprenticeship as well as pre-apprenticeship, the opportunity for students to learn while they're in school and be connected to an employer so that they will have an opportunity for a career advancement in the future.
I've got a question for you. Based upon the previous interview with Chris and Ryan, how about if the three of us, representing the public, the private, and the public-private, that we take the responsibilities a year from now to have this actual preparedness summit, if you will, this educational summit in which we take the work that's been accomplished from this time in 2014 and use 2015 as the time to bring all the parties together, to talk about what we've accomplished, and also to chart the course as to where we need to be so that the business community and education does talk. Would you be willing to do that, to work together to do that with MDF, of course?
Of course, most definitely.
Absolutely, that's a fantastic idea, and I would suggest that instead of just preparedness, we also look at skills. We want to talk about the skills that will be the ones that are desired by Maine's employers and make sure that parents and educators and students all know this is the way to go that direction.
Yeah. That brings up the point that I perhaps tried to make in the first one that was spoken to, and that is, there is tremendous work already underway in this state. So we don't have to invent something new, organization or infrastructure, that we have come to realize, again, through no one's fault, that the pathway to our success is going to be multi. I mean, we're going to need to focus on the skills development, educational attainment. Jobs for Maine's graduates are going to have a lot to do with embracing that workforce, both in terms of growing our population and workforce, but also in preparing them. But we're talking about core competencies. We're talking about certifications. You're finding that to be the case, I'm sure, Craig, in what your program is, as well as where you are with SWIB. Is that correct?
Yes, and when I think of a summit, Dan, I think of that as the energy and the direction.
Yeah.
This is a main problem, but it's also facing our nation.
Yes,
we have the lowest youth unemployment rate since the 1940s throughout our country. There's a lot we can learn from other states, but if we tackle this as a main problem, Chris mentioned earlier, the work ethic in Maine is still very, very strong. We have the right players. It's just time to get rid of the turf issues, is to focus on the needs of people. And if we can collaborate and think differently about how we're doing business, we can solve this.
I agree.
I would agree. A summit would be a great way to identify a vision for this state and get everyone to sign on to a unified plan that we all knew this is the direction that we're heading.
Well, I think you heard it first here today that we're off and running. Not only do we have a plan, but it sounds like we have a partnership in place. And when we talk of the workforce challenge before us and turning that from a challenge into an opportunity, it takes a plan. I would contend a plan much like we've seen here today, but it is a two-part plan. I mean, we can't ignore nor deny the role that growing our workforce has in this state. And that's the area that puts us a little different than most states. We do have that challenge that many don't have, at least to the degree that we have. The quality, to both of your point, I think we are ahead of the curve. We just have to know that, accept it, and work with this plan to try to achieve it. And I guess I want to take this opportunity to thank all four of my guests today, because I think, truthfully, had we scripted it, it wouldn't have spoken better in terms of the challenge as well as the opportunity that we have. And we hope that people would see this as the opportunity that it presents for all of us, for our people as well as the economy. Those two things unite all of us, regardless of where we live, what we do, or our politics. And I guess in closing, I would say this, is that it is a challenge, but it's an even greater opportunity. And the state of Maine is ahead on this issue. We just need to come together better in terms of knowing what the other is doing and build upon the success of what's working. As Craig said, we're not the only state dealing with the challenge of a changing economy. We know our economy today, unlike the past, is less predictable. This is what we know about it. We know it's technology-driven, it's knowledge-based. We know that innovation and the entrepreneurial skill is very much a part of our success, and we won't get there without those ingredients. But the other thing that we know, even though it's played out on a global stage, we know that human capital is undeniable. We know that educational attainment and skill development is indisputable. Today, the state should take pride in the fact that we've addressed the workforce challenge, that we see it as an opportunity, that we have a plan, and we have the partnership that's required to carry it out. My New Year's wish for all of us in this state is that we take that to heart and realize the opportunity that it has to help our people as well as grow our economy, to stabilize our economy as well as to strengthen it. And my wish for all of you as this year winds down and a new one is about to begin, that each and every one of us will find in our hearts and in our place those things that matter most to us and share it with those who mean the most to us. With that, I thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you right back here, or better stated, right back in Augusta next month on The Bottom Line. Thank you and have a great month.